Thank you very much indeed, Jason and all. It's always a little bit off-putting to have to stand on stage after all these architects. So I'm actually wondering, what can I do to make it a little bit different? Architects always produce lots of beautiful pictures of their projects and so forth. I'm not going to do that. So maybe, Jason, we could do a double act. We could sing a Venetian song or something like that to make it a little bit different. What I'm going to do, I could do a dance as well, perhaps. I'm not sure. But maybe I'll just try my best to entertain you and to give you some insight into why we think carbon is the new sustainability. At Mott MacDonald, urbanisation is a very important part of the business initiative that we are driving forward for the next generations. It encompasses everything that we do, but particularly and most fundamentally, it's not just about sustainability, it's not just about better living, it's about putting people first. So I was very, very pleased to hear other speakers talking about people, livability, well-being. That is very much at the heart and at the core of what we believe in urbanisation. Today, however, I'm not going to talk about the urbanisation initiative or whatever. What I'm going to do is talk about carbon being the new sustainability. It was quite a difficult title to work out, or quite a difficult theme for me to work out what I could talk about, because I can talk for years on these subjects and I don't think you want to be kept from your wine. What I wanted to think about, though, was carbon is not new. Carbon accounting is not new, nor is sustainability. I don't want to talk about sustainability tools, rating tools for buildings or for infrastructure, and I don't want to talk about detailed design. But I do want to talk about people. Last year, everybody was very aware, and it has continued into this year, and everybody was very aware of the United Nations drive for responses to climate change, called COP21. There was the road to Paris. Everyone talked about it, everyone is still talking about it. Commitments were made in Paris in December last year. During the same period of time, the road to Quito was also being trodden. And the road to Quito is actually just as important in my view. In fact, possibly even more important, because the road to Quito is all about Habitat 3. This is the conference which will culminate in a symposium and a signing of all the declarations and policies in Quito in October 2016. It is the UN Conference on Housing and Sustainable Development. It is all about the needs and the responses of sustainable development for the burgeoning populations that we will be seeing in the years to come. Quito, hopefully, will have some outcomes, just as Paris did, and expected outcomes which have been in planning and which are being worked on in terms of 6 core areas of importance and 22 issues include policies, driving policies for urban development and responding to the challenges of urbanisation, strategies for implementing solutions to deliver on the policies, looking at the institutional arrangements and the provision of the differences between the needs of the urban population and the rural population, and also improvement of people's well-being. So why is Habitat 3 relevant? Well, I think it's particularly relevant because, and particularly to this part of the world, because it has been projected that 90% of the additional 2.5 billion urban habitats that are projected to live in the world by 2050 are going to be living in Africa and Asia. Also, relevant to this conference, construction sector accounts for 1/3 of the global resource consumption. So therefore, I think that if we are expecting huge increases in populations, huge increases in global resource consumption, it's a very unsustainable future. So what can we do? We think about this in terms of what if we could use carbon to quantify costs? What if we could use carbon to calculate consumption? What if we could estimate carbon emissions at the very early stages of design, of planning, all the way through the life cycle of a project for a city, for a development, for an individual facility? What if we could use carbon emissions as part of the design process in your project? And how about you can calculate carbon and embed it in your design within seconds, within the touch of a button. So we start off from the position of where we are just now. Where we are just now is there are lots of sustainability wheels, there are tools, etc. These are all very separate to the life cycle and the whole life costing tools that we have. And if we put them together, as we have done at Mott MacDonald, we have what we know as, very imaginatively called, a carbon portal. So the carbon portal obviously has imperatives in reducing the carbon intensity. COP21 gave very clear guidance as to the targets for the reduction. So our in-house tool is mostly used for optioneering. It is used for optioneering so that we take a design, we take a plan, we take a component of the design or a plan. We take a full-scale city design, we drop it in using BIM or other design mechanisms into Autodesk and so forth. We then use the Excel spreadsheets, we pop it into the carbon portal, and it draws on comprehensive data sets, and it provides an emissions volume. We're also, because this is a global calculator, we're also working with some industry professionals to get some Hong Kong specific emissions data. The carbon portal calculates carbon using assets. So you might look at the landscaping element, you might look at the roads, you might look at the drains, the utilities, you might look at the buildings or floors of the building or parts of the building plate, or you might look at the type of materials. You look at the quantity, the carbon portal will generate quantities and it will give you a carbon output. You can analyze the results from the carbon portal, and all the folders in the design will actually tell you what elements of your design are generating the most carbon or the greatest amount of consumption. You can look at it from scope, so it could be from the building structures, it could be from the electrical provision, it could be from the water supply, or it could be from the materials, and therefore that allows you to make decisions and to identify how you can actually reduce your carbon by changing a material, by changing a scope, by changing a type of surface drain, for example. Very important to actually think about cutting carbon, because cutting carbon allows you, when you're using it in terms of an optioneering process and in terms of being able to quantify, you can cut the carbon, you can cut consumption, you cut costs. We have proven that carbon is a proxy for costs, and we have done a huge amount of work, particularly in the United Kingdom and in America, where we have actually been working for utility companies and for framework agencies, driving carbon targets and then seeing how much the cost can be cut. Driving a carbon target of 60%, you can achieve an 80% in cost saving in many situations. There are many good examples where cutting carbon cuts consumption, cuts cost. We believe that this is one of the really strong ways to actually use the planning, the design, the construction and the operational information to create long-term sustainable solutions to meet the challenges of the massive amount of urban development that is forecast to take place in the next 2 decades. Thank you very much.